You are looking at a heating system that cost $8 to build and has been warming Amish homes through Ohio winters since before the Civil War. No furnace, no boiler, no monthly bill arriving in the mail. Just clay, straw, and a principle of physics so simple that the moment you understand it, you will realize why no one in the energy industry wants you building one of these. The first time I stood inside one of these homes in Holmes County, it was January, 14 degrees outside. Inside, 72. I spent 20 minutes looking for the furnace before the man who built the house told me there was not one. What I was feeling was not mechanical heat, it was stored heat, and the wall itself was the heater. Stay with me until the end because the technique I am going to share at the very end of this video is something I found in a handwritten Amish building log from 1873 that I have never seen mentioned in any modern construction guide. The average American household spends $1,400 every year on heating alone. That is $14,000 over a decade, $70,000 over 50 years. Money flowing straight out of your account into the hands of utility companies that have spent the last century making sure you never learn there was always another option. What if the most effective home heating system ever designed was perfected 400 years ago in Central Europe, and the only reason you do not live in one is because someone else profits from your ignorance? The Amish call it a kachelöfen. In English, it is called a masonry heater or thermal mass stove, and it operates on a principle that is the exact opposite of every modern heating system you have ever encountered. A standard wood stove burns wood slowly and continuously. You feed it all day. It produces heat that rises and disappears. A gas furnace cycles on and off every hour, blasting hot air through ducts that leak 30% of the heat. Electric baseboard heaters turn electricity into heat at the most expensive conversion rate on the market. All three systems have one thing in common. They are designed to keep running, and they are designed to keep billing. The masonry heater works differently. You light a fire that burns hot, fast, and complete, 1 to 2 hours, 2 or 3 pieces of wood at most. Then it goes out. But the firebox and the surrounding mass of clay, brick, or stone, which can weigh 3,000 to 5,000 pounds, has now absorbed an enormous quantity of heat. That mass radiates the stored warmth slowly and evenly into the living space for the next 18 to 24 hours. You heat once. The house stays warm all day and all night. No continuous fuel consumption, no monthly bill. The surface temperature of a masonry heater never gets dangerously hot. It stays warm to the touch, comfortable enough that children and animals sit against it. In an Amish farmhouse I visited near Millersburg, the family kept a wooden bench built directly against the heater. The kids did their homework there in winter. That is not possible with a metal stove. The combustion itself reaches extraordinarily high temperatures, often over 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. At that heat, the burn is nearly complete. Creosote deposits are minimal. Efficiency ratings measured by Auburn University have clocked masonry heaters at 80 to 90% thermal efficiency. Compare that to 60 to 70% for the best modern wood stoves. The efficiency is the standard that was abandoned when the heating industry shifted to systems that require continuous fuel input and generate recurring revenue. The earliest known masonry heaters were built in Northern Europe and Russia over 1,000 years ago. By the 1500s, the kachelöfen was a standard feature in German and Austrian homes. When European settlers, including the Amish, migrated to Pennsylvania and Ohio in the 1700s and 1800s, they brought the knowledge with them. They built these heaters in their new homes because it was the only system they knew, and it worked so well that they never stopped. But something happened in the early 1900s that changed everything. Natural gas infrastructure began spreading across the country. Oil furnaces became commercially available. Electric heating entered the market. An entire industry realized it could sell a product that required the customer to keep buying fuel for the rest of their life. There was no profit in a heating system that ran on firewood you cut from your own land. So the industry did what industries always do when a low-cost solution threatens a high-margin business. They did not ban masonry heaters. They just stopped teaching anyone how to build them. By 1950, masonry heaters had effectively disappeared from mainstream American construction, not because they stopped working, because they stopped generating revenue. The Amish kept building them, simply because the system worked and they had no reason to replace it with something more expensive that performed worse. Now I want to show you exactly what the $8 system looks like. The core of a masonry heater is clay, not commercial refractory brick. Clay, the same material sitting in the ground under your feet right now. If you live in an area with clay-heavy soil, you already have access to the primary building material for free. You dig it. You mix it with sand and chopped straw in a ratio of roughly 70% clay, 20% sand, and 10% straw. You add water until the mixture holds its shape. Then you build. The $8 covers the cost of straw if you do not have it on hand. Everything else can come directly from your property. The firebox sits at the center. The walls are built thick, often 12 to 18 inches, using clay mixed with higher sand content for heat resistance. Surrounding the firebox is the thermal mass itself, layers of clay brick or cob that absorb the heat from combustion and hold it for hours. The exhaust gases from the fire do not go straight up a chimney. They travel through internal channels built into the mass. These channels force the hot gases to give up their heat to the surrounding clay before they exit. By the time the smoke reaches the chimney, it has already transferred most of its thermal energy into the structure. You are not venting heat, you are capturing it. An Amish builder I spoke with in Lancaster County walked me through the construction process. He had built 7 of these heaters over 40 years. The entire build takes one person about 2 weeks if working alone. With help, it can be done in 4 to 5 days. The clay is free. The straw costs maybe $5, a few dollars for sand if your soil does not have enough. The entire system costs less than $10 in materials you do not already have on your land. $10 one time for a heating system that will outlast you, your children, and your grandchildren. Now here is the part that nobody in the heating industry will tell you. Building codes in most American states do not ban masonry heaters, but they make them nearly impossible to install legally. The International Residential Code requires that any masonry heater meets specific standards for combustion efficiency, emissions, and structural safety. Those standards are written in a way that assumes factory-built components and third-party testing. If you want to build a traditional clay masonry heater in your home, you will need an engineer to sign off on the design. That costs anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000. At that point, you are looking at compliance costs that are 100 times the material cost of the system itself. The code does not forbid it. The code just makes it economically irrational. Masonry heaters, which were standard in American homes for 2 centuries, are now effectively extinct outside of Amish communities. The utility companies did not need to lobby against masonry heaters directly. They just needed to make sure the building codes were written by people who had no financial interest in low-cost heating. But there is a loophole. In most states, you are allowed to install a masonry heater as a retrofit in an existing home without a permit if it is classified as a fireplace replacement. A fireplace is not a primary heating system under most residential codes. It is considered an amenity. If you remove an old fireplace and replace it with a masonry heater that occupies the same footprint and uses the same chimney chase, you are technically replacing one non-essential feature with another. No permit required. I am not a lawyer. But this is how some owner-builders in Pennsylvania and Ohio have installed masonry heaters in existing homes without ever stepping into a permit office. They documented it as a fireplace replacement. The system has been heating their homes for years. Now let me give you the technique I promised at the beginning, the one I found in an 1873 Amish building log. It has to do with how they manage the thermal mass of the floor. Most people who study passive heating focus entirely on walls and windows. The floor is treated as an afterthought, but in the oldest Holmes County settlements, the floor was part of the thermal battery. The Amish builders constructed their heaters with an extended base that sat directly on the earthen floor of the main living area. The base was not just structural support, it was additional thermal mass. When the fire burned, heat radiated downward into that base and into the packed earth below. The ground at that depth stays at roughly 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. The heat absorbed into the floor during the day radiated back up into the living space at night when the air temperature dropped. It added an estimated 5 to 8 degrees to the baseline temperature without any additional fuel. The log I found called it ground coupling. The Roman builders called a similar system a hypocaust. The Amish in Holmes County just called it the warm floor. Combined with the heater itself, the result was a home that maintained 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit through Ohio winters with a fuel cost of essentially zero. The average American burns through about 4 cords of firewood per winter if they heat primarily with wood. A cord of firewood costs between $200 and $400. An Amish family heating with a masonry heater burns 3 cords per winter. Wood they cut from their own land. Cost zero. No utility bill. No furnace repair. No service contract. No dependency on any supply chain that can fail. The system runs on physics and firewood, both of which are older than the utility industry and will still be here long after it is gone. The piece of this that genuinely makes me angry is how completely this knowledge was erased from public awareness. There are people in this country right now who have spent 30 years paying $1,400 a year for heat and have never once heard that there was a system that could have eliminated that cost entirely. Not reduced it, eliminated it. That erasure was not an accident. In 1948, the American Gas Association published a guide called Modern Gas Heating for the Home. It outlined installation standards and cost projections for gas furnaces. The guide mentioned masonry heaters exactly 0 times. It simply wrote the entire category out of the conversation. By 1960, every major heating manufacturer was producing gas or oil-fired systems exclusively. An entire generation grew up, never knowing that their grandparents had heated their homes with systems that required no monthly payment. The knowledge survived in 2 places: academic programs that studied historical construction and traditional communities like the Amish who never adopted the commercial heating model. The last major research paper on residential masonry heaters published in an American journal was in 1952. After that, the subject disappeared for nearly 40 years. It did not reappear until the energy crisis of the 1970s. By then, almost no one remembered how to build them. The Amish remembered. They had been building them the entire time. Now I want to give you something you can use right now, because even if you cannot build a full masonry heater in your home today, there is a scaled-down version of this principle that works in any room with a fireplace or a wood stove, and it costs about $15 in materials. You take fire brick, the kind you can buy at any hardware store for about $2 each. You stack them in a U-shape around the back and sides of your existing fireplace or wood stove, not touching the stove itself. Leave about 4 to 6 inches of clearance. The bricks absorb radiant heat during the burn. Then they release that heat slowly over the next several hours after the fire dies down. This does not replace a full masonry heater, but it extends the heating cycle of your existing system by 3 to 5 hours without any additional fuel. An Amish neighbor showed me this setup in his workshop. He had 10 fire bricks stacked behind a small cast iron stove. He burned a fire for 2 hours in the morning. The workshop stayed warm until mid-afternoon. Total material cost $20. One-time purchase, no installation, no permit, no modification to the existing structure. You just set the bricks in place and let physics do the work. That is the principle at work. Thermal mass stores heat. The more mass you add, the longer the heat lasts. If you want to go further, you can build a cob bench. Cob is a mixture of clay sand and straw, the same material used in traditional masonry heaters. You build a bench-shaped structure next to your existing wood stove using the cob mixture. Let it dry for 2 weeks. Once cured, the bench absorbs heat from the stove and radiates it into the room for hours. The bench doubles as seating. It is warm, comfortable, and entirely passive. Material cost is under $10 if you source the clay yourself. The instructions are available in dozens of natural building guides. But what almost none of those guides tell you is that this exact technique has been standard in Amish homes for over a century. They did not invent it, they inherited it. And they kept using it because it worked better than anything the modern heating industry ever offered them. Now here is the question I want to leave you with. If you knew in 1950 that you could heat your home for free using materials you could dig out of the ground and a design that had been proven for 1,000 years, would you have chosen to pay a utility company every month for the rest of your life instead? The answer is no. Obviously no. Nobody would make that choice if they understood what the alternative actually was. But you were never given the choice. The